on the plain below. The air was glacial, and snowfalls were frequent. The only reason the station wasn't absolutely buried in frozen H2O was that the wind blew most of it away. Though still there were drifts here and there, and occasionally the station personnel had to get on a ladder and sweep snow off the roof before it collapsed. The gate was padlocked shut, and an old Mercedes truck with icicles dripping from its bumpers was parked behind the gate as a security measure, another obstacle that a jihadist car bomber would have to push aside in order to blow up the installation. But the gesture seemed half-hearted. The regular station crew didn't seem very interested in the possibility of attack, and in fact Jerry couldn't see the station as a high-profile target. You wouldn't get many headlines blowing up an anonymous prefab site on a remote mountain in some place called High Zap. Much better to blast a cafe in Istanbul, or an embassy somewhere else. Jerry walked into the main building, stomped snow off his boots in the anteroom, and headed straight into the ops room with its coffee machine. He took his cup, a souvenir mug from Perga where he'd never been, and filled it with hot coffee. The coffee was unbearably strong. "You know," said his partner Denny, "you can watch the sunset perfectly well from the window." "Not the same," Jerry said. He had a hard time keeping his teeth from chattering. Around him, data flashed across flat-screen displays, intercepted transmissions from Syria, Iraq, or Iran. The material wasn't analyzed here. It was encrypted, sent to a relay satellite 22,000 miles above the planet's surface, then beamed down to a facility in Northern Virginia where it was either inspected or, most likely, ignored and filed away. In any case, the data itself wasn't any of Jerry's business. Neither Jerry nor his partner Denny were members of the station crew, nor were they CIA employees. They were special contractors who had flown to Turkey on a special assignment 8 days ago. What had surprised Jerry was the discovery that, despite working at a CIA facility, none of the station personnel were CIA employees. They were all contractors working for one corporation or another. But then he'd realized that, in fact, they all were CIA. The corporate identities were just ways of sanitizing the identities of agency employees. He'd realized that when absolutely none of them expressed curiosity concerning the task that Jerry and Denny had been sent to perform. The lack of interest in the Zap had been professional, all right, but it wasn't in any way corporate. But now Jerry and his partner were stuck here on the mountaintop. While they were engaged in their special assignment, transmitting the high Zap to sites below, the Turkish government had changed suddenly and violently. The Prime Minister, on a state visit to Spain, found himself deprived of his office by the military. The President was under arrest in an undisclosed location. The entire country was under martial law, particularly the Kurdish areas, such as those on all sides of the listening station. The attitude of the military government to the U.S. installations on Turkish soil seemed ambiguous. On the one hand, Turkey was a NATO ally of the U.S., and its military had enjoyed a long collaboration with the Americans on security matters. On the other hand, the Turkish generals were ultra-nationalists, who might view with suspicion any foreigners using Turkish soil for their own purposes, a suspicion enhanced, no doubt, by the possibility that the listening stations might now be listening to them. The orders that came down to Chaz, the soft-spoken engineer who was in charge of the station, seemed to Jerry to be contradictory. Chaz had sent half his people away. It wasn't clear where, exactly, and was now running the station with a skeleton crew of 11. Jerry and Denny, by contrast, were forbidden to leave the station at all. Jerry had asked Chaz why. "Because," Chaz said, "the regular personnel won't be able to tell the Turks anything they don't already know." Jerry and Denny were confined to the mountaintop by their own importance. They knew about the high Zap, and the high Zap couldn't be allowed to fall into foreign hands. Another frustrating aspect of the situation was that even though they were bored and had nothing to do, and the station was now short-handed, Jerry